All right. Hello, everybody, and hello, our fellow MESPA principals. It's me, Brett Domstrand, principal of Lake Marion Elementary in Lakeville, Minnesota. And we're glad that you're here joining the MESPA PrincipalCast. And today, I'm going to just jump right in because I'm very excited about our guest. We have lawyer, lobbyist, and just great all-around guy, Roger Aronson, joining us today. Roger, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Brett. I'm really happy to be here. Yeah.
It's exciting, and to think about having somebody who has such an impact on all of our leaders in this state, because not only do you work with MESPA, you're also, you work with MASSP. In fact, you might have a longer relationship with them than us, but we won't hold it against you. But it's your journey here, whether you want to talk about St. John's or where you are working at the Capitol now. Can you just tell us a little bit about what inspired you to become an attorney?
I always wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was in high school. I have an uncle that was just my hero as a kid. I didn't have any brothers, and my Uncle Terry was just of mythic proportions. And Terry went to St. John's, and Terry was going to be a lawyer. So boy, that was that. And it's hard for me at this stage to imagine that I could have done anything else and enjoyed it anywhere near as much as I have.
But that's
it's just really something. And the world was a lot bigger in those days. That was a long time ago. And I remember we were living in Moorhead at the time. I actually was born in Hibbing, and very large portion of my family is up there in Hibbing and on the range. And but we had moved to Moorhead, and my older sister Colleen was working at Moorhead State. She actually was the director of housing there, and she always said she was jealous that I got to go away to college, down to St. John's. I mean, in that day, that was going away. A few years ago, my daughter was picking a college. We live in Minneapolis, and she narrowed it to 3. One was in Tufts in Boston, Rice in Texas, and Claremont McKenna in California. So going away is a little different these days than. Yeah, but it just is one of those things. And when I got to St. John's, which was an interesting time, and one of the things I always like to tell is, and I went to college a long time ago. St. John's, 2/3 of the faculty were members of the monastery. That's nowhere even near that anymore. But they had decided that for freshman English, we would all read the same author. And so this was, I was a freshman in college in 1972. And so they decided that we would all read James Baldwin for the whole year. And we were, what do you want to say, middle-class white kids from central Minnesota. And I still remember, Brother Louis Bleckner, who taught that class, and struggling through the James Baldwin stuff, but just, what a fabulous education and having that experience. And you mentioned, I mentioned St. John's a lot, but it was, if you're going to be a lawyer in those days, everybody majored in government. And I was majoring in government, but I didn't like the classes very much. And I visited with someone and said, going to law school doesn't matter what you major in. And so that was the end of my government major. And I majored in humanities, and, I took advanced Shakespeare and world literature and Russian history and art history and, just a lot of different stuff. And it just was a neat time. It was just really, really fun. So I've always just loved it. It's just been the right job for me. And yeah, so there you go.
Well, and it got you into law school. Now, does St. John's offer law, or did you have to come to the cities to do that, or where'd you end up?
No, St. John's doesn't have a law school. At the time, there were 3 law schools in Minnesota, and the University of Minnesota, William Mitchell, which was the night program. And then there was a place called the Midwest College of Law that actually had moved over to Hamlin. And so Hamlin was a rather fledgling law school at that time, but those were the three programs. And I went to the University of Minnesota, yeah, which was it was a good law school to get into, and I think always has been one of the top 20 law schools in the country. I kind of had a dream of going out east. I was thinking of going to Boston College, and then the dean at St. Louis University Law School liked Johnny's and heavily recruited Johnny's. So the dean came up, Dean Childress and Dick the dean, and he came and visited with us. But a family friend who was a lawyer said, if you're going to live in Minnesota and you can go to the University of Minnesota Law School, that's where you need to go. So that's where I went. Yeah. It's a miserable, law school is a miserable experience, I thought. You got to do if you want to be a lawyer. And it's always, I like to say that to people, what do you want to do? I want to go to law school. You don't really want to go to law school. If you want to be a lawyer, you're going to have to go to law school. But if you go to law school, you're going to be a little disappointed. Everybody else that's there too, but need people. And the people that I went to law school with, Barry Anderson that I sat next to, he's on the Minnesota Supreme Court, and Randy Peterson, who was in my class, he just retired from the Court of Appeals, and you just know people that if you're in Minnesota, and I've spent my entire life here, I've never lived outside of the state for a day. So yeah.
It's interesting that you talk about how your uncle inspired you, and then here you are, and now your daughter is also a lawyer.
Yeah. Betsy is a clerk for Justice Tatel at the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, which is
big deal.
Very high end. It's the number 2 pretty much appellate court behind the Supreme Court in the country. And when she was going to go to law school, I didn't think it was all that good an idea. Just that the employment was kind of tough, but it's what she wanted to do. Well, and Betsy's Luann and I have 3 kids together, and we do just really joy. They're just really joys for us. Bets is an interesting kid. She went to Tufts in Boston, and then she was in Teach for America for 3 years. She taught 7th grade reading down on the Mexican United States border in Rio Grande Valley schools, and then she worked in New York City public schools for a couple of years, and then she applied to law school, and she went to NYU, which is one of the top 5 law schools in the country, and she graduated in the top of her class and was a law review editor and all that sort of stuff. I mean, she is quite the young lawyer. So really fun. We have Luann's son Eric, who lives in St. Michael and has a little girl now. Peyton was born in July, and she is the apple of our eye. And then the oldest, Joe, he's in Pennsylvania, and they have a little girl, he and his wife, who's also a lawyer, Erin, and they have a little girl that we haven't seen yet. And so now it's April 16th, and Isla was born on February 26th, and we were going to go right after she was born, and unfortunately Luann wasn't feeling really well, so we delayed it, and then the COVID stuff took over. And so we have been doing what everybody else has been doing, is watching a lot of Zoom with the kids. And but it's really fun having the 2 little girls. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny how you kind of downplay the law and how it must be attractive to you because you got into it. You've also propagated it because to have a family that also is in law, it shows. I mean, Roger, you are really good at helping others see the law as something that's not the enemy, and it's something that's pretty fascinating. And so you've obviously created some love with your daughter in that too. So there's something to be said.
Well, I have neat clients too. I mean, that makes a big difference in terms of the practice. I mean, I have really clever, smart, interesting, positive, and you've heard me say this before, Brett. I mean, would you want to ride, in a car to San Francisco with a group of school people, or would you want to ride with a group of CPAs? I think you'd have more fun with the school people.
Right. There's definitely some stories to be told. That's for sure.
You bet.
So
Yeah.
you've always been attracted to staying in Minnesota, and for those of our members who have attended any of your legal seminars, you always bring up your wife Luann,
Yeah.
and she has been an administrator, and so
I just retired as school principal. Yep.
the school principal, and so she has always helped probably give you a perspective of the day to day, so you can kind of operate in that. Talk about how your relationship as a husband and wife, as an attorney, as an administrator, and then as your role in education, how does that all work together, and how has it changed your perspective with how you handle a lot of
Oh,
situations?
it changes it tremendously. I think it's important, first of all, Luann is just, she's the best. She's mine. I love her dearly. And I've said this a lot of times. It's just a gift to love your spouse. I mean, just absolute gift. Um, but she's secondary. Luann was born and raised in Buffalo. Her parents owned the drugstore in Buffalo. Her dad was the town pharmacist, and she's one of 6 kids. And her mother lived to be 95 in the same house that Luann was raised in. She's the 5th of 6 kids. But Luann knows people really, really well. Her father graduated from St. John's. Her mother went to St. Ben's. All 5 of her siblings graduated from St. John's and St. Ben's. Both of her brothers are retired surgeons in Wisconsin. They were all American football players for Gallardi. Luann was a music major, and actually her first teaching job was junior high music in Buffalo. And then her life journey took her a little bit around, and then she was in California for a while, and then she came back here, and she was in counseling, and then on to high school administration. But when I prepare witnesses for interviews, the district wants to talk to somebody, how you handled this kid. So tell us about that. And I always say to people, you give them 4 instructions, and one is listen to the question, which seems stupid, but it's important. Challenge the assumptions and don't speculate or guess. And the last thing I always say is never forget that you're a school principal. I've practiced in this area for 40 years, but you know more about why you do things and what is the right way to do them than I do. And I have a deep respect for the profession. I know a lot of things about it, but there's a lot of things to know. And so Luann is always a fabulous source on that. John, is a great resource on that, and your colleagues, the people that we're talking to today is I always like to ask, why do you do it that way? And I think and I say this, and you've heard me say this, people really don't appreciate how good they are at being a school principal. I mean, a very fun fact that always interests me. My wife was a scheduler at the high school, and putting together schedules is a big deal at the high school level. And and you don't let it out early. You don't want people trying to switch their classes, blah, blah, blah. At the elementary level, our elementary principals assign kids into the 4th grade teacher, the 3rd grade teacher, and what I learned a long time ago was, when the parents call and say, did I get the good teacher? And a good elementary principal will say, absolutely, you got the best teacher. And it just amazes me that we assign 400,000 kids into classrooms at the elementary level in Minnesota every year. And legislatively, I've only ever had one squawk, and it was about twins. And this principal, I can't remember who the principal was, but I remember the twins. And the mom wanted them together, then she wanted them split, then she wanted them together, and the principal said, that's it, we're out of the pool. And the mom actually happened to be a legislative staffer. And so this bill was put in to say, the parents get to decide whether the twins are separated or whether they're together, and they were the 2 most adorable looking little red-haired girls, and it was, okay, Roger, you want to get up and tell us why you're such an asshole and won't let these kids be where they, but it has always amazed me, in terms of asking Luann about, why does this happen this way? And it is kind of, I mean, I remember years ago, it was kind of a fun story, but guy was a principal, secondary principal in a tiny little district. And there was a question about whether the students in the ALC were counted in the graduating class. And if you counted them, then there were 42 kids. If you didn't count them, there were 38. And I just couldn't imagine why that was a problem. And she said, does he have a kid or a favorite daughter? And I said, well, yeah, his daughter's actually a senior. And Luann said, well, if she's 20th and you count the ALC kids, she's graduating in the upper half of her class.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, and it just kind of, okay, you wouldn't know that unless you had somebody who could tell you, and it's fun. It's interesting. Yeah,
it is. Now you're making me think, Roger, because we've in the past, in your work at the Capitol, is you see all these bills get introduced, and you say, look at how many senators and how many legislators we have here, and if everybody's got their bill or that they want to get in, there's no possible way that if we passed them all that we would be able to do any of these things or do them well. And so can you share with us, because not every principal probably knows about how the sausage is made when it comes to actually us having some law and policy. How do we get from all these ideas and kind of maybe your role also and how you help shape it into what we end up having to apply as principals?
I think it's tough to be a legislator when you think about it. Running for office takes a lot of work. There's a tradition that you have to door knock. So you spend a summer, and this summer they all will do it. There's 201 of them that are incumbents, and assume that there's and even some people that retire, but assume that you have 400 candidates that are out there. They're going to knock on everybody's door and hand them a brochure and say, please vote for Brett. And assume that you spend the whole summer doing that. And then in November, you're elected and you go down to the Capitol and, you're going to pass a K-12 bill that's going to fund schools. But you'd like to talk about, grades and reading and, what should student discipline be, and what should the attendance policies be, and how could we support to get more teachers of color, and it gets very, very frustrating for legislators a lot of times where they'd really rather be a school board member, and we get a lot of that, and the standard really should be, are you passing a law that's going to make it better for teachers and principals, and to manage their schools and their classrooms, but instead, what they really want to do is they want to be part of it. They want to say, how long should the school year be, and what should the temperature be when we're going to call off school with the wind? Those are the things they want to do, and instead, jeepers, they're stuck with passing a $15 billion funding bill. And how does the special ed funding formula work? And you just spent all summer distributing these brochures. It gets very, very frustrating for them. So you get parents to come down and they have a bill that they want passed. And a lot of times we say, fine, okay, pass that. But really, if you think about it on the policy piece, if there was no new policy passed in K-12 for the next 5 years, all of MESPA and all of MASSP and all of the superintendent, they'd be just fine. Why? We got plenty to do, just plenty. And so it's interesting. So, we're real status quo people. I mean, we're trying to manage, um, provide information to say, okay, um, we can talk about that, but we really, this past year, we've had some kids that have died from sudden cardiac death. And so there were multiple proposals to say in the high school physicals that we administer for athletics, what screening should we do for cardiac anomalies? I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, we can really screen people, but a big screen's about $800 a piece to do a pediatric EKG and have a pediatrician actually read the thing. So I'd say that education has been a frustration, for a lot of people that get elected down there for things that they want to do. The discipline right now, that's a big issue, but I think it's a big issue because there's a lack of clarity, as to what should the rules be, what should the interventions be, and there's a lot of other issues in that. So it's an interesting, it's a really interesting process, as you step through it. And then you got all of the labor management pieces on it as well. What should the Tenure Act be? And I have to tell you, in my career, we used to say you had to do three. First of all, when I started out, the teachers did 2 years probationary period, not 3, and that was amended in the 80s to be 3 years, and then a year was any part of a year, and then a year was at least 30 days, and then it was 60 days, and now it's 120 days, and but if you get activated in the National Guard, we're not going to count that. I mean, they're looking for stuff that they can pass, and a lot of them would feel better in a lot of these issues working with the stuff that the local school board works on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a bigger deal to be at the Capitol and legislators, so they tend to kind of gravitate towards that. But it's tough work for them. It just is tough.
Well,
And
and those people are kind of like educators. They didn't choose to be a state rep or a senator for the money, and I don't see that being the reward. So it has to be that representation matters. And but after kind of getting to go to the Capitol and watch it happen, and thank you, by the way, for inviting us and
yeah,
being
we love
available
to have
to
you
all
down
of us.
there.
And I'm sad that we didn't get to do it this spring, obviously, but
Yeah. Wow.
um, it is to see how many people are there trying to passionately get their ideas put into paper and then put into law and then convince other people to do it. But in your humble opinion and your experience, how many of our representatives and senators are really getting a lot of laws passed, or their language, when there's that many people representing that many, I mean, so many pockets of our state, is what's the reality and the reward? I mean, because I'm sure everyone goes and I'm going to pass everything I present, and then the reality kicks in.
Well, I think you start out from a point of view that it's hard to pass a bill, and that's a good thing. It should be hard. That ensures that you get stuff that gets pretty well vetted, and so what legislators learn real often is working with other people. What a shock, But and so people that are good at working with other people, they're highly successful down there. I mean, I think people that come from the outside down there to watch a lot of times don't understand that legislators like one another, and they set up their own little friendships. And so, you and I have always worked together, and there's something in your committee. I just say, hey, can I get this? Just put in some language here. I just need to have this, and sure, yeah. And then later, when you need something, you come and talk to me. Your thing goes in. A lot of times, you don't even know who this was introduced for. I mean, you just don't know. And so, in terms of making the big splash about, I introduced 5 bills and my 5 were passed. The process doesn't work that way. I mean, it's a big, everyone getting their language in, or helping someone else have the limelight and getting their language in. And I think there's a lot of success on that. It can be frustrating to be in the minority for a long time, but frankly, people that are in the minority and that are good at that really learn the importance of, okay, what do I need to do to get my stuff passed? And if I don't like being treated this way when I'm in the minority, when I'm in the majority, I'm not going to treat people this way. I'm going to treat them, better, and we'll do some good stuff together. So it's very interesting. And now with the internet, which is not modern anymore, but
Right.
they're all talking to one another, in groups online all the time. And of course, now they've learned Zoom. Uh, they're doing that. Um, when I started, there were 4 telephones on the Senate floor, and you had to be pretty important to have a phone on the Senate floor. And if you were a lobbyist and you got a call from the Senate floor from one of those 4 phones, that was a big deal. There were little phone booths in the back of the Senate. Now you can send a text message into a member when a bill's up,
Right.
and which we do
Yeah.
from time to time. So it is interesting. But boy, I think the members, it's easy to say, this one's crazy or that, but I really have a lot of respect for anybody who's willing to do it, because it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of good reward on it, but man, it's tough. And so I think one of the bad things about it is that because they meet so long, that it really makes it not possible for a lot of people to participate in the citizen legislature. That's unfortunate, but that's the modern deal. That ain't going to change.
So it's interesting. You were mentioning about having relationships, and that's how a lot of things get done. Is hey, people are developing friendships and relationships, and I
Yep.
can tell you from the time I testified and from the times I've done tours, is as you walk those hallways, Roger, people are like, "Oh, hey, Roger," or you're like, "Hey, I just need to talk to this person real quick," and I noticed that you're having these micro interactions that are minutes long, but it's a quick handshake, although that might be different now. But you're
Yeah.
having these conversations. So before I talk about how you got to become a lobbyist, talk a little bit about how you utilize those short windows of time, because it's not like you can take everyone out to dinner and go, "Hey, can I get 3 hours of your time today?" You're really doing these small meetings. Talk about a little bit how that works, or how that works for you.
It's being present. It's being there. And it's spending a lot of downtime. I should make a list of how many education committee chairs that I've been through. On both sides of the aisle. It's been a bunch. And it, you need to, your reputation is everything down there in terms of being helpful, of being accurate, of being responsive, um, and it is a relationship, driven place. And I have really good collegial friends with the lobbyists that I work with. I mean, we talk all the time, and we're friends, and we socialize together, and we know what our kids are doing, and we cover for one another. And so that really makes a big difference too. And you got to know how the stuff works. I mean,
Yeah.
it takes a while. You can't it takes a while to figure the place out. I have to say, I really, I'd hate to be starting at square one again.
Well, so talk about how did you go from Roger Aronson, attorney at law, to Roger Aronson, who also happens to be a very successful lobbyist for the principals. I mean, because when we talk about who represents us, your name.
Everything's serendipitous. And um, my first connection to principaling, when I was in high school, I was on the executive committee for the State Student Council Association. And they ran a student leadership workshop down at St. Olaf College. There were 2 1-week long student council camps, kind of before camps were crazy. I mean, this was long time ago. And the staff were teachers and principals. I don't know, they had a staff 8, 9 people, and then there were 2 of us that weren't teachers or principals. It was me and Mark Scherenbrock, and a lot of people know Mark. Mark and I, Mark graduated from St. Cloud Tech, but we were down there every summer when we were in college. We'd go down for 2 weeks, and then I continued to go even when I was in law school. That I worked with those people for a long time, and just got to know an awful lot of people. And it was kind of funny when I was starting to practice law. The secondary principals were going through a change with their lawyer, and they knew me. And so they Phil Tenney was the exec at the time. Phil passed away a couple of years ago, but Phil said, we think you could do this. And so, I mean, it was him taking a chance on me, and those were some real learning years, and talking to, making friends with a lot of the lawyers in the school law community, and really trying to figure out how all this stuff worked. And, I was in a small firm, and then I went out on my own, and then I was in another small firm for a while, and then I've been on my own again for several years. But it was serendipitous of being on that student council board and being at that workshop. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. My mother grew up in Hibbing. She actually grew up in a little town that I was where when we were born. I was living in, called Kelly Lake, which is a little tiny town outside of Hibbing, and big train station there for the mines. My grandfather was a conductor for the Great Northern. Well, all of the little the bus stops on the way into Hibbing were the Kerr location, Latonia, Carson Lake, Kelly Lake, and Rudy Perpich was from Carson Lake. And my mother and Rudy graduated from high school together. And so when Rudy was lieutenant governor and was governor, there was kind of this presumption that, and my stepfather was his press secretary, there was kind of some presumption that I might know something about politics. And so I got sent off to do that as well. So I just kind of got dropped off at the Capitol with a note and this assumption that I could do these things. And, and you think about how many times as principals you say to somebody, to a teacher, you should think about being a principal. You'd be good at this, and I think that was my experience as well. I mean, somebody that was a senior person that said, we think he could do this. And, so there I was. How about that?
And timing, because you were open to that as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I've had a lot of good people that I've worked with, that have done an awful lot of things for me through the years. And, and maybe when you're younger, you're a little more aggressive, and you might be more critical or this or that or the other thing. And I think I had some of that too. One of the things that interests me now every once in a while, and I'm sure you see some folks too, but we'll have a principal who's like 1 or 2 years out, and oh God, they're so smart. They know so much. And, their superintendent is so dumb. And, the superintendent is telling me this and this and this. And I'm usually listening to that thinking, you're going to be really good someday when you combine some judgment with all of this smart stuff.
Experience is the best teacher, and unfortunately,
painful
experiences are the ones.
I watched a stupid movie, and now we're watching all these movies, and this woman was like an astronaut or something, and her supervisor said, you're a really good pilot, but you're not a leader, and he said, because you've never screwed up. You've always made everything you did. You've never had to make that decision where it just was a lose-lose call. And when you do that, that's when you're going to really be a leader. I was thinking, man, that ought to be in an admin class, I mean, it's easy to give everybody a raise and to give them, a perfect score on the evaluation. The tough one is when you have to go talk to somebody and say, I'm non-renewing you. This just isn't working out. I mean, that's the tough, and it is interesting, but I think I had a lot of that kind of training, and, and now we work with a lot of people on that to help them with that, I mean, and it's fun. People are good. People are good.
You work with Dave Adney as well, and
Yeah.
Dave was a mentor of mine as I
Oh,
was
cool.
a teacher working my way towards the principal role. And besides him being just very well read, the guy consumes books and is really someone who shares that. He said to me, and it's always stuck with me, is he said, Brett, you're only as good as your last decision. And so when you make the good one, ride it, because pretty soon you're going to walk around the corner and someone's going to be unhappy with the decision you made, and then you're right back to you're not your persona non grata. So get ready for that if you want to be a leader.
The other thing too about being a leader, I honestly think people are amazed when they discover how small the K-12 administrative community is in Minnesota. Everybody knows everybody, and you think about if Brett's out looking for a job, there is and there might be 50 applicants for a job, or that's open, but if it's you and you built up the people that in Minnesota, suddenly it just all works. How that happens, and it's quite the community. It's fun to see, and it's different. You meet with a group of principals, you can tell, and I don't mean this in any disparaging way at all, but it's very, very different than dealing with the teachers. Very different than with the activities directors. And frankly, principals are very different than the superintendents. I mean, I think with the principals that there is, I'd be interested in your thought on this, but I just don't see a lot of competition among you. I really do see everybody pulling on the same oar. When you're at Institute and we do the little little short 8-minute bites on the stage, everybody in the room's rooting for everybody that's up there to succeed.
Yeah.
Think about that professionally. I mean, what a different deal, and how neat that is. And it's a fun group to really be part of.
Well,
Yeah.
Roger, you say it to us. I mean, how many principals are there in Minnesota? I think you know the number.
Yeah, 2,000. Yeah, total.
So there aren't
Bottom principals, assistant principals. Yep.
right. So you say there aren't enough of you out there. You're like, if anything bad happens to an attorney, everyone goes, "Is there a dime a dozen?"
Nobody cares.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're held in a high standard, and so we're always being under a microscope. And I think that is actually something that bonds a group of leaders together, because
Yeah.
no one knows that experience like a fellow principal. And it's interesting when you talk about superintendents, you talk about teachers. Is I always look at it like the principals are the sandwich. We're holding the top with the superintendent here. We've got the bottom with our teachers and our families, and we're in that in between, and we're trying to make sure that everyone's getting what they need in that. And it's it really requires a special set of skills.
Well, and this, and everybody knows this, but it's just good to remember it. And there's nothing teachers like better than having a good principal, and there's nothing the principals like better than having a good superintendent.
Yeah.
I mean, it works so well when that's happening. And yesterday, David Law was testifying at the Senate, and David's just such a great representative to have. I was on a phone call yesterday with the St. Paul Principals Executive Committee and Joe Gothard. I'm doing some work with someone I've known for a long time, Karsten Anderson, who's in Red Wing, and another lawyer was telling me about some really neat stuff that Karsten's done for his principals. It just it matters so much having a good superintendent. That being said, I am never people that go into be associate superintendents or go to be superintendents. they need to do that with their eyes open, because people that have done that, it's not like getting promoted. It's going to a different career. And, you know, it's different colleagues, it's different supervision. You're not dealing with kids, you're not dealing with parents, you know, and it is interesting how many people want to come back, you know, that I've heard once they've gone out to, everybody wants to, you know, because you guys all, you like to think you're moving up and all that sort of stuff, but sometimes it's good just to look around and say, actually, I'm here.
Right? Yeah, and I've got it pretty good. And then the
I
grass,
don't need to be moving up.
yeah. You know, so Roger, this time is already flying by. So I just had to ask you,
No
because
problem.
as we talk about your family, and you know, people know you as an attorney, but you also have other passions. And I just got to ask, what are the things that you enjoy doing besides the grandkids? Because I know while you have one, the other one you're going to see sometime soon when all this COVID thing settles down. Is what do you enjoy doing outside of working, of lobbying, of like when you
Well,
have?
Luann and I love to travel. We went to Croatia last September. Um, she just picked it. And to go somewhere else, we went to Split, Croatia for a week. We travel on our own. We don't go with a group or anything like that. Pick a hotel on TripAdvisor, and by the way, highly recommend Split for anyone that wants to go there. But we went to Venice the year before. We've been to Florence a few times, you know, London. We have a lake home up by Detroit Lakes. We love being up there. We just absolutely love being up there. And in fact, we have side-by-side lake homes up there. And it's a long story about that, but we do a lot of that. And, you know, before you and I were talking, I went for a hour and a half walk with her today, and we spend our time together. We went to Napa Valley for a long weekend in October, and it was our 10th wedding anniversary, which was pretty cool. So we like to drink a little glass of wine too.
Hey, that's a good way to relax, especially at the end of a good day, and especially in Napa Valley. Now that's
Yeah, and if I got nothing else, then I just call and torture John a little bit. You
know? Well, and that's and Millerhagen. Now the two of you, you're like brothers. You're like a stand-up comedy duo. You can name what you are at different times, and that talk about how
just
that.
a couple months apart too. That's the kind of fun part. So yeah, and you know, he's a cobber, and but yeah, John's just a joy to work with. We just have a lot of fun. We do have a lot of fun, and I give him a bad time, but he's a very good sport about it. And I think that he's the right guy, you know, to be the executive director of the association. I really do. He's good at it.
And I think we're lucky to have him. It's
I absolutely think so. And I can kind of count on he won't be watching this, because he has to edit that part out. Yeah, no.
He's trying to snow me, and he tells me how much he loves the podcast. So let's see if he's listening. John, we're going to see if you're checking this out. Send us a text. But hey, and that last piece, you know, is you and John say it to us, and I think for our principals to just hear it, is that we can, if we're ever in need, there's you, but we can also talk to John about any situation, and the two of you have that relationship to represent all of our principals professionally too.
Absolutely. That's one of the best way to get a hold of me, that the best way, you know, is to text me. And, you know, because wherever you are, you know, you can read the emails. You'd be amazed. I mean, I get 250 emails a day from the Council on School Attorneys. But just best to text me, and you know, we were particularly with the distance learning and the other issues that are surrounding stuff, we're trying to really stay on top of getting back to people with stuff that they need, because stuff is immediate, and people need to know. So yeah, we're really trying to do our best on that.
Well, we appreciate everything you do for us, Roger, and I really thank you for taking time to be on the podcast and making it happen. And now you're not a Twitter guy, right?
You know, I have a Twitter account. I gotta I got to work it a little bit. I kind of fell behind, but it's a lot, you
It
know.
is a lot.
Um, um, the um, I'll have to get back and do a little bit more of that. I really am thinking, and I've talked to John about this a little bit today, though, that um, what might we be doing differently relative to legal seminars in the fall? And if we're going to do that, we're not going to do them in a Zoom format like this. We're going to need a better camera. We're going to need some display boards, you know, that I can work with while we're working with people, and thinking about that now. I mean, I think there's going to be some good changes. You know, we may do these where we have 30 people in the room, but we may have 30 people participating on electronically as well. So we're gonna do a lot of different stuff. I think it's gonna be pretty good. When God looked down on us when the stay-at-home stuff didn't start until after Institute.
Right.
You know, I mean, just look down on us on that. You know, I also do work with the State High School League, and you know, they had to cancel the boys basketball tournament. They had to cancel half the girls basketball tournament. The economic impact of those events they're huge relative to the league's overall budget. You know, it's one of the things, you know, MESPA has a fund balance, you know, that kind of stuff, to reserves to protect against some of this stuff. And we're going to do well. I think we're going to actually be better. There are some organizations that will not survive this, you know, and MESPA is going to come out even better, I think, on the other end. And, you know, it's because it is such a great organization.
It is. It's an organization that gives back. The members go in, and it continues. It's a reciprocal relationship that I love, and I love being part of MESPA, and we're really grateful for you.
Me too.
So, everyone, we just want to say thanks for listening to the podcast today. Roger, thank you for being here, and everyone.
All right. We'll do it again.
Please
take care. Have a great night.
Share this podcast out, everyone, and thanks for listening.